Adrian, I'm going to go first today. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So today we're doing something different that we haven't done before, and we are actually going to deliver mini sermons on different texts because I was drawn to Romans and you were drawn to?
The Gospel, Matthew's Gospel.
So the reason why I was drawn to Romans is because when I was first ordained, I received some advice that was from this very lection, and I want to tell you about that. So, shall I go ahead?
Yeah, good.
All right. So when I was first ordained in the Church of England in 1995, the church was just beginning to ordain women as priests. And there were a significant number of people who were not happy about that. And what happened was those people who were unhappy let women priests know that they were unhappy about that. And I had a particularly difficult encounter with someone who did not approve of the ordination of women. And I was upset, and I went to go talk to my rector. And to my disbelief, my rector advised me to repay this person's nastiness with being pleasant. Now, that sounded to me like I was being asked to do the impossible. I felt a little bit like selling out. But my rector asked me to hear him out. He said that being pleasant works on many levels to your advantage. First of all, when someone is aggressive towards you, what they expect is for you to come back and be aggressive towards them. And if you are not, it will confuse them. The second thing is that being nice to them is like, in St. Paul's words, heaping burning coals upon their heads, because they will be frustrated by not being able to draw you out and bring you down. So in a way, you are on the winning side of the argument if you can be pleasant, because you get to keep your integrity and your honor. But in my experience, there's another benefit of responding by being pleasant and open to someone who's difficult, because it builds spiritual resilience. It makes you a more resilient person if you can overcome someone's aggression. And it also, surprisingly, I think it fosters compassion in your heart. And why I think this is particularly relevant right now, as you can see, I've just gone back to Wellesley College, so you can see my Wellesley College shirt, is that the days ahead are going to be challenging. There is nothing that can prepare us for the decision-making we need to make in the midst of a pandemic besides being in a pandemic before. So there's so much outside of our control. But what is within our control is the way we respond to people. We can decide when we wake up in the morning that we are going to always be on the side of love, on the side of honor, and on the side of goodness, hospitality, peace, and harmony. And in a way, that is a far more subversive behavior than you may think. Over to you.
That was a really good sermon. So,
Thank you.
So you mentioned the days ahead of the pandemic, and so I'm looking at. I thought I'd look at Matthew's Gospel today, and some of the words that we hear in this Gospel are probably not words we want to hear entering into a pandemic. If anyone wants to become my disciple, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. And, probably for a lot of people, it's like, we don't want to hear that right now because we're going through this pandemic, and what we want to hear is that, God, you're with us, and not like, I've got a cross for you to bear, or you need to lose your life. But what is Jesus saying here? Is he literally talking about losing our lives to be his disciples? And certainly there are cases of where that is. I was reading, as you know, a biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer this weekend in Maine, and he in 1939 he was in America, and the head of the Union Theological Seminary said, stay here in America. Don't go back to Germany where you'll face a persecution from Hitler, who you've opposed. But he said, get thee behind me, Satan, and went back to Germany because he felt God was calling him to be with his people, to witness against Hitler, and he paid for it with his life. But for most of us, it isn't about that literal sense, about literally being called to martyrdom. And it wasn't when Jesus said these words to his disciples. It was much more, as Archbishop Desmond Tutu tells us, about denying our ego, about saying to ourselves, I'm going to not put myself and my selfish needs at the center of life. I'm going to deny that, because following Christ, being a follower of Christ, is about caring and loving our neighbor, as we heard in the letter to the Romans. And to do that means that we have to set ourselves aside. We have to die to ourselves in a certain way. Now, what's been really interesting is that during this pandemic, during a crisis, we're actually very good at this kind of thing. We've seen doctors and nurses and people in food factories and all kinds of places, people putting their lives at risk and on the line to serve greater society. And we see examples of this all the time, of people jumping into the sea to save someone in crisis. In a way, in crises, we're good at being willing to sacrifice ourselves. But paradoxically, it's actually harder in regular time. Although I must say, and I think that you would probably remind me, that I think women, mothers, often are good at this at all times. That they set for their families, and dads are as well. So we do know about this. We know about sacrifice for other people. But in a way, Jesus is asking us to be his followers, asking us a little bit about something slightly different, which is about loving our neighbor who is our stranger, as the story of the Good Samaritan tells us. It's not about just loving people who we already love, but about going the extra mile. And that's harder, I think, when things are going okay for us. That when we're okay, we kind of forget about people who might be struggling. And as Jesus says, the poor will always be with you. They're always going to be people who need our help. And part of taking up your cross and losing your life is making the commitment to never allow yourself to be too comfortable and to ignore that there are people in need. And I think for those of us who live in relatively blessed lives, in Holliston and in Wellesley or in the surrounding towns, this is it's hard every day to remember that. But God has blessed us and calls us to always be open to the pain that the world is experiencing, and to be moved by that pain, and to respond to it. Whether it's here in America, whether it's in Boston, whether it's in Wellesley or Holliston, or whether it's in Africa or far away, or Lebanon, or wherever it may be. And so, we've seen our doctors and nurses do this, and the question for us is to be inspired, even during ordinary times, to be like that. Does that make?
Yeah, it does.
That makes sense.
And the one thing I would like to end with is the fact that whenever I preach a sermon, whenever a preacher preaches a sermon, there's always another side.
Yeah.
And so there are some times when you are not called to be pleasant, and there are people who need to speak up for themselves, and we need to feel that pain. But I think that when I think of the times that I have most fretted, it hasn't been a huge justice issue that I've been upset about. And so we just need to be aware that there's always another side to everything we preach. So there's a time that there are people who need to be more selfish.
Yeah. And there are people who have just made huge sacrifices and need to, the thing they need right now, I think, is God's love, and they need our love. They don't need to make yet another sacrifice. Yeah. But there are other people who do need to hear this word. Yeah.
So there's always a part that's unsaid.
Yeah,
but we just said it because we can't stop.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate those words. Actually, thanks. Okay, bye.